The Spin-off Podcast Network. You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by Spark Lab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about Spark Lab, including details about the latest events, workshops and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
Kia ora koutou katoa and welcome to Business is Boring. New Zealand Mānuka honey is well known for its properties aiding the immune system and skin healing, and it's now a $600 million industry for the country. Less well known yet is Mānuka oil, especially the East Cape variety that's super high in qualities that are clinically proven to be many times more effective than the Mānuka honey for antibacterial and skin healing uses. One man out to change this is Stuart Cairns. Stuart started his career as a jewellery entrepreneur and ended up with a big exit to a listed company. He then became an investment banker, eventually helping build his company up to $1 billion of turnover. Looking for an interesting project after all of that, he found Mānuka oil, and it became big quite quickly. In 5 years, his company, Mānuka Bioscience, has helped professionalise and grow the industry, planting 8 million Mānuka trees, creating scores of jobs on the East Coast, and using his brand Mānuka RX to grow Mānuka oil as a skincare ingredient. To talk the science, the journey, and what this could mean for New Zealand Aotearoa, Stuart Cairns joins us now. Tēnā koe, thank you for being here.
Hi Simon, good to be here. Thanks a lot.
Hey, so tell me about your background before Mānuka Bioscience. What first led you to investment banking?
Right, well, before investment banking, it sort of started from university. I went to university in Otago and I got sick of working in the freezing works in the holidays. And I decided one holidays that in about my third year down there, or second year, third year, that I was going to do something a bit different. And I had a girlfriend who had some jewellery, and it was sort of copper bangles and copper silver-plated jewellery, and I thought, I can do that. So I decided that's what I was going to do this Christmas, and I borrowed a couple of $100 and got all the gear and made this stuff in the hotel room, in my flat room. I made about 5,000 of these damn bracelets. They're just copper bracelets, and I got them all silver plated, and I had to oxidize them and make them look like antiques. And then I took off. I didn't have any money, and I hitchhiked from Dunedin, and I was stopping at each place that I thought might sell these things. And by the time I got to Queenstown, I had enough money for a rental car. And then I took the rental car up the island, and by the time I got to Wellington, I had enough money to buy a combi van. And then by the time I got to Auckland, I had as much money as I would have made at the freezing works, and I had a combi van. And so didn't have to work for another month, and so I thought, this is great. So I went back to university that year, and a friend of mine had seen what I'd done, and he said, how about I join you? And we start this jewellery business down there, which we did, and we ended up with about 3 or 4 jewellers working for us, guys who actually knew what they were doing, and we built it into quite a good little business. So, and that was in my last year at university. I didn't finish. I was up in Auckland on a sales trip, and the flat that I was living in burnt down. You know, someone left a heater against the wall, and so I lost everything except an insurance policy and my passport. So I went back and I had this money from an insurance policy, which was about a couple of grand or something, and I didn't finish university. I sort of stayed there. We kept the business going, and then I came back up to Auckland. And it was a bit more competitive in Auckland, the whole jewellery thing, but I teamed up with another real jeweller, and we built quite a big jewellery company. At that time, there was sort of duty and sales tax on gold, on anything gold coming into the country. And it was about 40% duty, 40% sales tax. And we thought gold chain would be a good thing. So we took off to New York and we found a second-hand machinery dealer up there and decided that we'd bring some machinery back to New Zealand to make gold chain because no one was doing it. And so we knew nothing about machinery. He said, there's a guy in LA who might be interested in doing a deal. We went over to LA, we did a deal with this guy and said, we'll buy all your machinery if you come down to New Zealand and teach us how to operate it. And we brought it all down. The stuff arrived. We had to find about 40 grand for shipping and duty and everything on the machinery, which we didn't know where we'd find. We ended up pulling all that together and built a gold chain business. And that went pretty well. I ended up selling that to a public company after a couple of years for quite a lot of money, and I was sort of about 30. And after that, I sort of cruised around and lived a bit of a life and played a lot of golf and things. And there were a few guys who I'd worked with, and we decided we'd set up our own little investment bank. And what that did is we just did investment management. We had a few contacts that we pulled in from before that. We had a contract to buy agricultural assets for a wealthy family, a wealthy European family, and then we looked at small companies on the share market, and we tried to take positions in them and restructure them and things. And we ended up getting a share broking license. We got a team together of share brokers, and we grew that business over about 10 to 15 years to we had a revenue of about $1 billion, but narrow it through a 4% margin, so for about $4 million in net revenue. But a lot of money flowing through the system, and really we'd started this from putting in 10 grand each, and we had 65 staff, and we were highly geared, and it was going really well. We're doing transactions at the bottom end of the share market. It was, restructuring quite a few companies in forestry. I was in forestry and oil and gas. And then the stock exchange changed the rules, which rightfully, so we were able to take client funds in and use them to offset client liabilities. And when you're talking about $1 billion, you've got quite a bit of money sitting there. They said that every company needed a higher capital ratio. And the banks were coming into the industry at that time, the trading banks, BNZ and ASB and ANZ were all taking positions in share broking. We couldn't raise the capital, and so we closed it down. And that was an unhappy ending to a great sort of 15 years. But that was the investment banking career. It was really good.
What a
little story.
Yeah, what a journey. And so when people hear investment banking, what does investment banking kind of mean? Because it's a pretty broad term, isn't it?
It is a broad term, but it's really about matching investees with investments. It's looking after people's investments. I was keen on the merger and acquisition side, so we're just working with an acquirer who wants to acquire a business. And so we'd have a research team looking at that industry. We'd look at the industry and decide who are the players in it and who might be interested. And then we'd become sort of real estate agents to go and talk to the people. And then we'd be the intermediary between the lawyer and the transaction. And we'd try and manage the process so it didn't get too tied up with the legal teams and just just be part of that whole transaction process.
And your path in there was probably reasonably unconventional, I guess. But is it something that's full of conventional pathways in, or is investment banking somewhere where there is a bunch of creativity and interesting kind of business-minded people?
I think now I think the bigger transactions are managed by the bigger companies, and the pathway in there is sort of high qualification and internship with one of the bigger players. I think there are a few smaller boutique M&A places around, but the real path to the big investment banks is pretty structured. It is now.
And if you think to investment banking in the 80s leading up to the share market crash, I mean, these images pop to mind that I'm sure have been absolutely kind of, skewed by things like the Wall Street movies and all this kind of stuff. But you see some big shoulder pads and you see some long lunches. And like, how true is all that? Early cell phones and stuff. How true is all that?
Pretty much. Pretty much. Long lunches. We used to go to Hooker Lodge for a conference, for conferences, and the conference was sort of just with 10 guys and their partners, and it was pretty full on and pretty good.
And then coming out of investment banking and having been in the middle of, an enormous number of deals, and also kind of on boards of listed companies and, governance and all kinds of things, really established things. What led you to be thinking about leading your own thing?
Well, when all that happened, I worked with a few clients on managing a couple of projects, rural projects, one large rural project, and a couple of M&A deals. And that was for about 4 or 5 years. Then I thought my partner and I bought a place at Karaka, Waiapa, and I thought we'd live the dream and have a lifestyle block, and I thought I'd be really clever, and it had a large glass house and nursery, and we grew herbs, rocket and all those sort of things. And I thought, this would be the way I could manage the property, because I'd have a few staff looking after the nursery or the hydroponic nursery, and they could do all the work around the property, and I'd be I could have a look at a few things. Well, it wasn't quite like that. Small business, small glass house, plants don't have holidays, staff do. Staff don't, that level of staff doesn't turn up every day, and plants still have got to grow, and the customer still needs the stuff. So I was working harder than I'd ever worked. Physically, I was doing something like, I had a thing on my wrist, and I was doing something like 18 Ks a day running around the glass house, and I thought, that. So 4 or 5 years later, we managed to sort of get out of that, and then we shifted back into Remuera, which has been where I've sort of been brought up, and I thought, I really want to have a good shot at something that I can scale, that I can be part of, that scales globally and unique to New Zealand. And I had these simple things. I want it to be able to scale, and I want it to be unique New Zealand, where we couldn't really get competitor from somewhere else coming in and taking us. So I went down the path of trying to do medical Mānuka honey wound dressing thing, and I was looking at that, and while I was researching it, and I went to talking to some of the honey producers, and I went to a company called New Zealand Mānuka in Whakatane, and I met a guy there, Phil Caskey, who was one of the early founders of the Mānuka honey industry, and he worked with that Peter Molan from Waikato University, and they really discovered the properties of Mānuka honey. And he presented to us, and he said, we've got this thing called Mānuka oil, and he said, I think it's just so much better than Mānuka honey and is going to be bigger and offers so much more opportunity. And at that time, the superbug was a bit of a thing around hospitals, and he'd said that this Mānuka oil killed MRSAs, killed the superbug, and it was good presentation. And I went away from that, and I thought, boy, that's interesting. And I started researching it, and from the old investment banking days, having a look at the industry, having a look at the market. There were so many research papers about the efficacy of the oil, what it did, hundreds and hundreds of research papers. And then looking at the industry, there are only really two producers, and there was Phil Caskey's operation, New Zealand Mānuka, and there was another company called Tairāwhiti Pharmaceuticals, which was up at Te Awaroa. And I thought, this is really interesting, let's develop a product, see what we can do. We developed a little yellow tube of ointment that we were going to run up against Lucas pawpaw. It was bright yellow. It was we thought it was a natural healing product, and it went really well. We sold it online, and we sold it through retail, and it went well. And when I went back to Phil Caskey to buy some Mānuka oil, he said, we can't supply you for another 9 months or something. And so we thought, we're going to build this Mānuka oil business and we can't get any oil. That's really cool. So we went up to the other producer, a guy called Mark Kerr up at Te Awaroa, and we started working with him, and he was a lot more laid back and didn't see us as a big threat. And so we worked with him for over about 2 years and to get to a supply arrangement with him. And so at that point we were talking about co-shareholding and how it was working, and New Zealand Mānuka became the opposition or the other side. And we worked with Mark to just develop his business up there. He was processing oil from Wild Harvest, and we just got on really well. We enjoyed going up there. It's a long stretch. It's 7 hours to get there, and we'd go down there and spend a few days down there and just enjoy it.
And it's such a special part of the country, the East Coast and up around Te Aroha and those kind of places. Tell me about kind of like what's special about East Coast, East Cape Mānuka oil, and kind of like you mentioned that it has these properties, to help fight superbugs and stuff. Like, a lot of people will be familiar with Mānuka honey, but what's different about Mānuka oil?
Well, Mānuka oil comes from the leaves of the tree. Honey is produced by the bees who take the nectar from the tree and turn it into honey. It's a different method of action. It's got a methoglyoxal and a couple of other things in the honey. And the oil, the main compound that's been researched the most is the beta-triketones. They're the compounds that sort of do most of the antimicrobial work. And the East Cape has a level of triketones that's up around 30%. Mānuka throughout the rest of the country is really under 5%. And so the East Cape has the special sort of, I don't know, I think it must be climate and genetics. We've taken genetics outside the area. They seem to work okay the first generation, but the second generation doesn't. Plants sort of adapt to their location. So there's something about it up there that maybe the isolation, maybe, I don't know, maybe the nice people.
Yeah.
Just grows better.
Yeah, and that kind of, so if Mānuka honey is kind of the Mānuka flower processed through a bee.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, is it stronger going to the source, or what's the difference in the actual kind of, I guess, the way you use it or what it's used for?
Well, we say that Mānuka oil leaves honey for toast. You can't eat Mānuka oil, you can't drink it, it really tastes terrible, and I don't know, I think it would be pretty bad for you, but it tastes terrible. Honey is beautiful oil, because it's not processed through a bee and it's a different compound, but it's about 1,000 times more effective as an antibacterial than honey. It's just not processed. It's not processed by a bee. It's a different product, It's a lot easier to apply as a topical application. It's pretty strong on its own, really strong, too strong, so it needs a carrier, but it's a lot easier to work than honey, thick honey, thin oil.
And what kind of stuff? So you've mentioned the antibacterial and the anti-bug stuff. Like, what other properties does it have? As Mānuka honey especially is known, I guess if I think about it, I go to like immune system-y stuff and wound healing and wound knitting and stuff. Is it in that kind of camp?
When you combine oil and honey, you're about 40 times more effective in a wound dressing, and it's been used as a wound dressing in the UK for quite a long time. It's a broad spectrum antimicrobial. Honey's sort of known for its antibacterial properties. Mānuka oil's broad spectrum antimicrobial. That means it's antibacterial, it's antiviral, it's antifungal, it's antioxidant. We say it's anti-everything. And there's evidence right through a spectrum of a lot more actives and a lot more activity than honey, and different things. It's antiviral, and research that's going on at the moment shows it's really powerful antiviral, possibly good for all sorts of viruses, much more powerful, probably straight from the source, where honey's not.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll be back in a moment to hear how Stuart Cairns built up Mānuka Bioscience and is building an industry around Mānuka oil to take it to the world. Spark is proud to partner with the Sustainable Business Network and the Climate Action Toolbox. The free Climate Action Toolbox can provide you with simple step-by-step guides to measure and reduce your emissions. Help lead the way to a low-carbon future for New Zealand. Visit sparklab.co.nz/sustainability to find out more.
Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today.
Raising capital or taking your business to the world? Investment Fix has the lowdown on everything you need to make it happen. This season, we're exploring the US market, the opportunities it offers, what it takes to grow a business there, and the best way to approach investors. Join some of the superstars of the investment and business world as they share advice from their time in the US so you can make your mahi count in this massive market. The Investment Fix podcast, brought to you by Invest New Zealand. Tune in today.
And we're back with Stuart Cairns, co-founder and CEO at Mānuka Bioscience. Yeah, how's this journey been for you? Like, from getting in, at the beginning thinking you'd like to get to something that can scale. What stage are you at now on that journey? And how's it been for you?
Well, we're still a startup. It's only 5 years old, 6 years old, 5 years old, I think. And it's still a startup, and we have normal startup pains and probably too many opportunities for us to chase. We've got a lot happening in our science programs, and the real challenge is to focus on the limited resources on single opportunities or as fewer opportunities as possible. We have lots of markets that we supply bulk oil to around about 26 different countries. That's not where we want to go. We want to turn that bulk oil into added value product in New Zealand. And then it's the challenge that any sort of exporting companies sort of going to face is getting into those markets, and how do we do that in the best way. And our competition is tea tree oil or patchouli oil or other ingredients that we're competing with, rather than our Mānuka oil competitors in New Zealand.
And if I think about something like tea tree oil, I probably think about Thursday Plantation or something like that at the supermarket with their dandruffy and, natural underarm deodoranty things. Is that the kind of thing? So you've got at the moment Mānuka RX, which is skincare, like high-end, lovely kind of skincare stuff. Is it also kind of, building out things like that? Like what kind of products would you see Mānuka oil being in and being kind of synonymous with being good for stuff?
Yeah. Yes, good question. When we started with that yellow tube and the different products that we were doing, this is when my co-founder and myself were doing it, two old men, we didn't have that much creative flair around about design and packaging, and we were looking at Thursday Plantation, and we were copying their products or doing similar products to them but using Mānuka oil. But in terms of looking at it as a brand and a collection of products, it wasn't sort of right. And if we wanted to grow this globally as an e-commerce brand, a tube of ointment that fixes your problem is not a repeat sort of sale. So and it's not a high-value sale. So for $29 for a tube of ointment, it takes away your eczema or your foot fungus or something, and you don't buy it again until you get the problem back. And as a part of the business model for e-commerce, it just wouldn't work. So that's when we got some marketing specialists in. We got a fantastic marketing team, and they sort of morphed us over and changed the brand to more skincare products, which have a higher sales value and a higher repeat value. And so that's where the model has changed. I do see us perhaps creating another brand or working with someone else to create another brand in that Thursday Plantation type space, where you've got hair products, so you've got all the things that Mānuka oil is good for. We're just really focused on that e-commerce because it's a way of growing the global awareness of the oil and the ingredient itself.
Yeah, cool. What would your advice be to people who, might discover something that they think has this potential? How do you go about building up a business around it and building up the support and, making it into a thing?
Well, you just get passionate about it and do it, really. There's a logical step. There's a lot of people around who help, and identify the opportunity, put a bit of planning around it, but don't sort of be negative. Don't think of all the bad things and think about the good things. As you get older, you think more about the bad things. You think more about the risk management, and you don't really want to get there. I've always had a reasonably high propensity for risk, but when you're younger, you can really go for it. And look, reach out to people. I found people have just been so helpful, and we're talking now with people who've been into US markets, people who've been into all sorts of markets, and the advice that we're getting is just there and just so helpful, just step by step.
And there's some great, stories like Trilogy that, did a fantastic job for kind of rosehip oil. And you've got Sarah Wickens from Trilogy on the board, is that right?
Sarah has been on the board. She's about to leave the board, unfortunately. She's been great on the board. She's got another conflicting position, a position that may create a conflict of interest. So she won't be with us forever, but she has been a great contributor. She was a real success story in growing that brand from the garage to sort of sale of to a global interest in the end. There's a couple of really powerful New Zealand brands in different areas. Antipodes is another fantastic brand which is going extremely well. Asano is a sort of a supermarket brand that's in 3,000 stores in the US now, and we've got some really good things happening in skincare in New Zealand, and it's an added value product that we can create here and add good value, and we can do it competitively.
Yeah, and as a final thought, 8 million trees planted, scores of jobs created, these ranges going. Like, what will success be for you? It already looks from the outside like a lot's been accomplished, but what will success be for you personally and for Mānuka Bioscience and its products?
Yeah, it's a long journey, I think, and if you take that Sauvignon Blanc and Marlborough, and that's a long journey, and I think creating an industry on the East Cape that provides sustainable employment is a really good part of what we're doing. Then to have a New Zealand brand that is available and see it in every duty-free store when you're flying to wherever. I think the success for me is seeing this New Zealand product, unique New Zealand product, globally.
So cool. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing the story, and can't wait to see the growth of Mānuka oil into the future.
Thanks very much for having me, Simon. Thank you.
So thank you to Stuart Cairns, thank you to you for listening, and for everyone who helps make this happen, like our producer, Ethan Dupe. Do follow Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to rate and leave a review if you like what we do. E noho rā.
From the Spin-Off Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Kia ora e te iwi, Te Aihe Butler here, podcast manager at The Spin-Off. If you enjoy listening to our podcasts, consider supporting our mahi by signing up to become a Spin-Off member at thespinoff.co.nz/donate. The Spin-Off Podcast Network.